Perfect. So it's recording now. I think we'll start soon. Perfect. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. My name is Yaniv. I'm the founder of Rediscover Dad, and I'm here with Phil and Andra. Andra, a divorce coach, and Phil, a divorce lawyer. And we wanted to talk about some topics. We'll help you guys have a resource for when you're dealing with divorce. So thanks, guys, for joining me.
Sure. Good morning.
You bet.
Yeah. Let's start with you, Phil. There's in terms of the legal process, maybe introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your experience, how long you've been doing this.
Sure. So I'm a family law attorney, focus my law practice on divorce, child custody, child support. I've been practicing law 25 years. Been practicing in the area of family law exclusively for 16 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
Nice. And it's your firm, obviously. You started your
Yeah, it's my firm. It's a small firm by design, boutique family law firm. It's me, one other attorney, and a paralegal. And we all three collaborate on all cases. So we take a team approach to every case. We don't take every case that walks in the door. We're very selective on the cases we take. And when we do take a case, it's again, we all three collaborate on each case. We really focus on client service and the client experience. And so, a client calls, we're gonna answer the phone. If we're not available, we will call back as soon as we can. And we're not gonna, for example, have a situation where a client reaches out 2-3 times, they never hear back. I hear that from clients that we take on. That will never happen with our firm. So that's how we run things. That's how we approach it. And glad to be here. Yeah. Thanks for organizing this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Phil. And yeah, Andra, so you do coaching, basically, in divorce coaching. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Sure. So I work to help fill that gap that is very naturally created when people are going through this process. There's an emotional need for support, and so I help clients navigate that piece of it. Hopefully in partnership with someone like Phil, with an attorney who is guiding them through the legal process. But I look at my job in sort of two parts. One is to help them with the emotional support, to really help them be present, sort out where they can compromise, where they can where they need an advocate for themselves, how to set new boundaries, how to communicate, how to move toward being a healthy co-parent. And that's one side. And the other side is more on the logistical side, helping them to get organized and, sometimes just sitting with someone to help be a partner as they're filling out paperwork or gathering information that they need to submit, because that logistical piece can feel so overwhelming, the process. And so, I really look at myself as an advocate, a thinking partner, someone to join the team so that people can hear and process and act on the good advice that their lawyer, like that Phil, is giving them, so that they can actually hear it and use it well. If they're too overwhelmed and shut down, sometimes they can't even hear that. So part of my job is to help them be able to take that in better and sort through it, and help them make the best decisions possible for their future.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been a divorce coach for about 5 years. So I pivoted from a career in communications, marketing. There's a lot of tie over, believe it or not, certainly in the communications piece. So I use a lot of those skills in my work with my clients. I was in crisis communications too. So that obviously fits. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks, Andra. Yeah. I appreciate you guys being here. I'll just say a little bit about myself as well. So I started Rediscover Dad. I went through a divorce myself. And when I was going through the process, I realized there's a gap because obviously there's the legal portion, and also in terms of the coaching, people like have coaching and therapy, but I feel like there was something missing in terms of all the other aspects of literally going through the divorce which is, finding a place and moving and making sure that, when a dad moves into a new apartment, it looks nice and welcoming and homey for him and for the kids. I feel like it's crucial in the process. And then keeping it clean, even if you're post-divorced after a few years, make sure it's decluttered and some housekeeping chores that maybe are not done regularly. So that's why I created Rediscover Dad. And we also have counseling, which is therapy as well. To your point, I feel it's extremely important, Andra. So I'm glad we're talking about this. And let's kind of go into a little bit more into some topics. Phil, what do you think are most important steps for someone in terms of the legal process when someone is going into a divorce process?
Yeah. So first off, we're talking about child custody issues that often does come into play when there's a divorce, but it also, we deal with cases where the parents are not married as well. And we're just, aside from the divorce issues, the financial issues, we're just dealing with custody issues. So what I'm going to say applies to both divorce and post-divorce, as well as situations where the parents may not be married, right? And it's a little bit different legal process, but the end result, as far as the parenting, is the same. It's important I think for people first to understand that Colorado doesn't even use, I'm saying the word child custody. That's a pretty common term. Colorado law does not use that term custody. It's not even a concept in Colorado. The idea being custody was thought to be, or to denote some sort of ownership over the children. And so many years ago, Colorado revised how they look at parenting issues in divorces and when the parents are not married as well. And so what we're looking at usually are two broad categories, and then there's a lot of detail under each. So the first category is the courts are going to look at and assess parenting time. So that's when, it's what it sounds like. It's when which parent has the children when, and it gets very detailed, as you both know. So parenting time is one of the broad categories that courts are going to assess and ultimately issue orders on if there's no agreement. And the other large or big category is decision making for the kids. So whenever we talk about child custody, when I use that term, just again, I use it because it's an easy term that everybody understands. But in Colorado, what we're talking about is parenting time and decision making for the kids. Okay, that's what custody means. Mm-hmm. In Colorado, fathers have the same legal rights as mothers when it comes to parental responsibilities. Both parents are looked at least initially as fit and able to parent the children. In my experience, I have not seen. I'm going back a long time. I can't think of a single case where I thought the judge was biased against the father. Just because he's the father, just because of his sex. Colorado's really good about that. I think judges really do a good job of looking at the family situation and making determinations based on each family's unique circumstance. So I think it's important to understand the larger picture there. Do you have questions about that? Was any of that not clear? Or
no, and it's good to hear. I experienced it myself, but yeah, like the assumption, I would say, was like, yeah, everyone, it's 50-50, almost if proven otherwise. So it's good to know.
Yes, let me clarify. It's
yeah.
I don't know that I would go to that extent. I would say that it's more, in my experience, more an open slate. Meaning it's like, I don't think the court defaults to 50-50, and then there's got to be a reason to deviate from that, or any other parenting arrangement. I think courts look at it really like a blank slate. They want to hear from both parties. Usually when there's a custody dispute, more often than not, the court's going to appoint some third party expert to come in and do an assessment. Typically that's a child and family investigator, which is, I don't know if you guys dealt with that in your divorces, but that is where the court appoints, and the parties can request it, but the court can appoint it on its own as well. A third party neutral to come in and do a brief, and I'm using that's the term in the statute, a brief assessment of the family situation, interview the parties. If the children are old enough to be interviewed, they will interview the kids in a very age appropriate way. The kids especially when they're younger, they don't know they're being interviewed. It's just somebody who's come into the home and they're just talking to them in a very age appropriate manner. They'll talk to neighbors, extended family, teachers, etc. Parents of the children's friends, that type of thing. And they'll assess and they'll issue a written report. That report, and by the way, the fees for the CFI are capped at $3,250. That doesn't include testimony fees, but the fees are capped because the courts want this to be a relatively affordable process. They don't want to bankrupt people by, having to come up, both parties having to come up with thousands and thousands of dollars for this process. So $3,250, that's, I'm not saying that's a little amount of money, but that's, the idea is it's low enough that most people can, especially if the cost is split, they can still meet their daily needs while paying for the CFI. And so getting back to what I was saying, the CFI will, after the assessment is completed, draft and issue a written report with their parenting recommendations to the judge. Now, the judge is not bound in any way by what the CFI says. It's just a recommendation. And in my experience, I can't think of a single case, and I've dealt with CFIs dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I can't think of a case where the judge just blindly followed everything the CFI said. That said, the CFI does have a lot of influence, and it's important. And so when there's a CFI involved in one's case, it's extremely important to present well to the CFI, answer their questions, be cooperative, be on time, get them the information they need. The CFI is going to, in my experience, they do their best. They try to be neutral. Often parties are not happy with the CFI's report, and there's things we can do after the fact if that's true. But the thing to understand with the CFI is they have a lot of influence. They don't make the decisions, but what they say has a lot of influence. There's other professionals that the court could also appoint in the right case. CFIs are the most common. Primarily what we'll see if there is extreme discord and possibly mental health issues, the court has the authority to appoint what's called a parental responsibilities evaluator, which is different than a CFI. A CFI can be an attorney, it can be a mental health professional, et cetera. It doesn't have to be either. They go through, I think, 40 hours of training. Yeah, you can check me on that, but it's something like that. They have to be approved by each county or each judicial district. A parental responsibilities evaluator, PRE, must be a mental health professional. And while a CFI is prohibited from doing mental health testing, psychological testing, they can recommend it. They can't do it, even if they're a mental health professional. If there's substance use issues, they can recommend a substance use evaluation, but they can't do it. The PRE is a mental health professional who can perform these psychological tests and can coordinate with other mental health professionals, such as substance use evaluators, domestic violence evaluators, and they will do a much more in-depth evaluation of the family circumstances. Again, it's almost always incident to or corollary to their mental health testing, and a lot of times it's pretty intensive mental health testing. And then they will also issue a written report with a recommendation for parenting to the judge. The reports are going to be much more involved. I mean, we're talking 80, 100 pages sometimes with multiple, exhibits and appendices. If often there's a team, so there's other mental health professionals who are involved. PREs are less common because there's no cap on their fees. And so a PRE, that evaluation could be $15,000, $20,000 or more. That is cost prohibitive to many parties going through the legal process. Many people cannot afford that. The judge, I've never seen a judge order a PRE without at least one of the parties requesting it for that reason. Courts are very reluctant to force the parties to pay that kind of cost out of pocket. And so when there's budgetary issues or neither party wants a PRE due to financial issues, typically the court's going to default to the CFI. The problem there is, though, in some cases, the PRE is really the more appropriate expert, especially when we're dealing with, there's so much discord and there's so much he said, she said, and there's possible mental health issues that are, interplaying with the parenting issues. A PRE is, in my opinion, a much better evaluation and a more appropriate in the right circumstance. But again, it's cost prohibitive in many cases.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Great answer. Very detailed. I actually, one of the things that I was thinking about when you said that they even interview kids if it's child appropriate age. What is that age usually?
Yeah. So the word interview may not. I mean, it is an interview, but that word kind of carries some connotation. Let's say the child is. I've seen where the child's 2-3 years old. They won't interview the child, but they will talk. It's an adult friend that's come into the home. That's sort of how. I mean, they're not lying to the kids, but hey, this is so and so. They just want to come in and chat. Typically they'll have coffee, and it's very welcoming and inviting to the CFI. The child is meant to feel comfortable, and they'll play with the parent, or the CFI will talk to them and just ask very basic, how's school? Who are your friends? What do you like to do? Very basic things like that when the child's young, but they do want to see the interplay of the parents. When the children are older, let's say, now it's up to the CFI. There's no law that delineates these ages, but say 8, 9, 10, 11, that age group, what I've seen is the CFI will do the same types of things, more age appropriate, but also maybe go to the child's room just with the child and just kind of talk to the child. Often and usually at that age, they're going to try to talk to the child if possible without the parent there, because the child's old enough to articulate some things. But again, it's all very age appropriate. And then as you get older, the kids are 15, 16, they know what's going on. They know what they can Google what a CFI is. And so the interviews then will be conducted in a way that's age appropriate for them. But they do want to see the child, and especially when the child's younger, they want to see the interaction between the parents. And what we also often see in these CFI reports is exactly that: the CFI's impressions of the child. The child's comfortable. The child went to mother or father with asking for things, or when they needed something and they were comfortable doing so. The CFI is assessing how the parent and the child interact. And so it's the home visit, it's what they call it, is an extremely important part of this process. CFIs typically will do one home visit for each parent. And so it's important. To your point, Yaniv, you're talking about having a nice home and a warm home. It's not required. Meaning if, people understand if someone just moved out, they may not have had a chance to get their apartment set up, but to the extent they can do that, and there is a warm, welcoming environment that's child appropriate, that is important for the CFI to see when they do their home visit.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for that info. Andra, I'm going to ask you, how do we deal with all of this? I went through it. I had my share, but I want to hear from you a little bit.
Yeah, I went through a divorce after 20 years of marriage. Also, did we lose Phil? Oh, there he is.
He's back.
I froze up.
He was out. He's back. Okay. Thankfully, mine was not contentious in that way. It did not require that kind of intervention, and for which I'm very grateful. But the reality is that divorce, regardless of even the easier ones, I should say, easier ones in quotes, right, are very emotional and overwhelming for people. And there's a reason why divorce is listed as the second most challenging life event that people will go through after the death of a loved one. And it's because of all the emotional things that are associated with it, the grieving and the loss, and in many cases, a readjustment of our identity. Who do we see ourselves as we adjust to this new version of ourselves in this different chapter? And that can be a really challenging process for some. Not everybody responds in the same way, obviously. That's what makes it hard. Some people ask me a lot, do men respond different than women? And I would say no, that's not, to me, what the differentiating factor is. To me, the differentiating factor is the person who initiated it versus the person, usually there's one, who is less inclined to go down this path. And that's where I find the biggest differences, is whoever decided that this was no longer working is usually not always, but in a better place mentally than the other person. And so my job, whether it's, the man or the woman, is to help figure out how to um, balance all of that and still be able to make good decisions. It's really easy to, spiral and be caught up in a lot of the negativity, to take advice from friends and family who are certainly well-meaning, but probably bring their own divorce baggage, or, are really trying hard to just be team you and show their loyalty in a way that has really the best of intention. And we all need those cheerleaders around us, but we have to just be careful to sort out that advice as being inflammatory versus productive. And really, is it designed to help us move things forward and ultimately be a better co-parent, come out better on the other side and be the person we want to be? Or is it designed to inflame and, just get back at somebody? And I really always like to remind people to ask, as they're going through this, what is my true intention with each decision? Because when you ask yourself that, is it to cause the other person harm? Is it to do better for your kids and yourself? When you get to the heart of what that is for you, it will help you make a decision that you can look good back on and feel good about. What's best for you? What's best for your kids? And it's not always clear in the moment. We like to think that decisions are so easy to make, right? And they're obvious, but when you're emotionally compromised and depleted like you are during divorce for so much of it, to feel like there's a sounding board, a way to evaluate the questions, so that you do have these goals in mind of what you want the future to look like, it can make a big difference. So I really like to work with people to help them set goals for the future and really think about who they want to be down the road, because it gives you a reason to lift your chin up a little bit and to see possibility and hope, so that yeah, it feels overwhelming today, but it's not always going to feel like that. There is life after divorce. It can be really wonderful. I realize that it isn't always visible when you're in the, eye of the storm, but I do believe that everybody has that amazing future, the possibility of that out there for them. But helping them get there is part of why I do what I do, because I love seeing people find their optimism again.
Yeah, and it's a great point. It makes me think, in terms of when you're in this process, you really think, it's almost like I can't see beyond this.
Yeah.
But you should, and it's hard to do, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's life does, it does go on, but it's hard to see when you're in the process. So from your point of view, how do you think someone can manage that stress? How do you help them, and also help them rebuild themselves during the process and after the process mentally?
Yeah, that's the work, right? That's it. So what I really love to do with people in the beginning is figure out where their main pain points are. And those are different for some people. Some people are dealing with some of the issues that we've just been talking about, parenting time and, custody issues. Maybe it's co-parenting, specifically communication with that other parent. How are you managing that? Some other people are dealing with moving, selling a home, maybe going back into the workforce after many years. So people have different pain points. So figuring out what each person's area of focus is, what's their main challenge, and then creating a plan. It's really breaking it down into manageable pieces, just so it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming. Can be just so practical and useful, just to say all of these things that are flying at you right now don't necessarily have to have equal priority, right? We can figure out how to break them down, what to do first, create a step-by-step plan so that you just can start to feel some sense of accomplishment, get a few wins under your belt, feel like, today was a little bit better than yesterday. It might be literally as simple as that. Today, I felt better. I got out and went for a walk. Like reminding people to do some of the simple things to take care of themselves, set up a support system. That's a really big one. And to think about, are they being kind to themselves along the way? How can they give themselves some grace? We have a really high standard for ourselves usually. We don't talk to ourselves the way we would talk to people we love normally. And to remind people that it's okay to say, I give myself a little bit of grace today. I'm not having a great day, or give myself credit when you do reach an accomplishment and you feel better than you did yesterday. I often ask clients when they say, I'm doing a little better. And I'm like, that's awesome. Why? Let's dig into it. What did you do differently that you can build on so that we can find those successes and hopefully gain some momentum around that, rather than just saying, I'm going to, hope for the best, that's what happens tomorrow too. Let's really figure out what you did differently. Could be as simple as, like I said, going for a walk, or, connecting with a friend, or forcing yourself to take the high road in a situation, and you realize that you didn't end up in a conflict. When you challenge yourself to do some of those harder things and realize that you can do it, that's where the success starts to build. And you realize, like, I think all of us every human being has gone through some pretty difficult experiences in their life. There are very few people that have not had any challenges in life. I can't think of anybody I know.
Right.
So what did you do to get through those? You did something. You're on the other side of it, right? How can we use those skills? How can we figure out what those skills were and tap into them and apply them here? Maybe you're a really good researcher, or you ask for support, or you're really creative. Whatever it is, let's tap into that and apply it to this process, because I'm sure there are ways that we can do that to help you see that you can build on your strengths to get through this also.
If I could follow up on something you said, Andra, which was very important. You said taking the high road, and earlier you were talking about how it's important to look at the basis of your decision making. You said this a few minutes ago, and you want to really analyze how you're making the decision and what factors you're using to arrive at a decision. On the legal side of that, I tell every client this: we need to, as much as we can, portray you to the judge as the good guy, as the responsible adult, as the one who's not trying to ramp up the vitriol and the litigation. To the extent we can do that, and if we're able to portray the other party as maybe the one who's a little bit more litigious, maybe making decisions more based on getting, like you had said earlier, getting back at the other spouse versus what's in the children's best interest. I tell every client this: it's extremely important that we can portray you that way. And there are things I tell the client that you can do to help me do that. And one is, assume everything you say, either on a voicemail, a phone call, assume it's being recorded. Just assume that going in. Maybe it's not, it probably isn't, but assume it. Email, text, social media, just assume everything is going to be read by the judge, the CFI, PRE, and the judge. Just go in with that assumption, number one. Number two, when you're making your decisions, take the high road, like you had said, not just because it's the right thing to do, but that strategically that enables your attorney to be able to portray you to the judge as the good guy, because their judges are going to, it's a lot of he said, she said. Judges are going to hear a lot of conflicting evidence. Sometimes there's no way to get to the bottom of it. If there's no witnesses, say at a certain incident, they'll hear from the CFI, they'll hear from the parties, but a lot of it comes down to the judge's assessment of each party's credibility. I mean, that is so much of this. And so to the extent we can show the judge that you are the more credible party, you're the one who's taken the high road, you're the one who has communicated in a respectful way, you're the one who's not brought the kids into the mix of this. The more we can do that, the better. So don't badmouth your spouse to anybody, certainly not in front of the kids. But just don't do it at all. You can feel it. while this process is going on, don't articulate it. Okay. Just assume it's going to come back to bite you. And if you take that approach throughout the case, you have a better chance of getting the legal outcome that you want as well. So what you said is so important from an emotional and psychological perspective, but it's also important on the legal side as well.
Yeah, don't give anybody any food to bury you, right? Like,
Right.
why would you do that to yourself? And I hear that all the time. To follow up on that, well, my spouse doesn't deserve for me to take the high road. That's the answer I get. And I say every single time, it's not for them. You do that for you. You're not doing it for your spouse. I don't care if they never see it. I don't care if they ever know about it. What I care about is that you know how you behaved and that you are doing what's best for you and your kids. And that will come back, and it will come back to you legally, as you're saying. It makes your lawyer's job so much easier. And honestly, it makes your healing and your process easier too, because it gets you through this really difficult time in a way that you can at least look back on and say, I did my best. And that is a lot. That's not a little thing, to be able to say, I took the high road and I did the best I could.
Yeah. And the other thing, I've never been through a divorce. You guys have, so you tell me. But I hear this from clients also, that everything you said is true. And I'll add that when the children get older, if they're not already older, they will know exactly what happened and what each of you guys said. They're going to figure it out, because it's such an important part of their life. And
honestly, Phil, they know when they're younger too.
Yeah, they know everything.
So that's almost the most important reason.
We give them credit for it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even they may not know, to your point, they may not know, exactly, right, the language and understand the nuances, but they get a feeling of who's speaking poorly about the other parent. Yeah. And that perception is toxic. Honestly, it's toxic. And, there's a study, there are several, that divorce itself isn't what harms kids, it's the conflict. And kids see themselves as part of each parent. They see themselves in each parent. When one parent is criticizing the other parent, they're actually criticizing the child. And when you think about it that way, I don't know, that really stopped me in my tracks when I read that. And it stops my clients a lot of times. We may want to say negative things about our ex, but we certainly don't ever want to say something negative about our kid, most people. So recognizing that it actually is one and the same is a big awareness that people can take into this process to do better. When we know better, we do better, hopefully, right? You do the best you can until you know better. And then once you do, you have to do better. Once you know better, you need to change your behavior. And if you know that you're harming your kids with some toxic back and forth about your ex, it needs to stop.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I want to, I'll share a bit of my story, like the personal story in terms of kids and how it affects them. And it's so true, even if they're much younger. And like you said, Andrea, like they can't articulate it. It's going through their minds, and it's definitely affecting them. I have two boys. They're 7.5 and 10.5 now. And, I've been separated 3 years ago, divorced for 2 years. And it was obviously hard for them, just like any kid that would go through this. But at some point, they both asked us, me and the mom, to talk about the divorce, and they wanted to hear why it happened. So we actually sat down a few months ago with both kids, but then like separately, we gave time for each one, and they asked us questions, and the questions were almost, I would say, adult questions. It's like, why did it happen? And how is this and how is that? And we explained these things to them. And they said certain things that like hurt us a little bit as parents, right? Like, they hate it, they don't like it, but they had really good questions. And what I've noticed is that after that conversation, both kids, it made things, to me, the way I see it, so much better for them, because they were able to talk about it and understand the situation. And me and my ex-wife, we made it very positive in terms of this was something between me and her and has nothing to do with them. And because they usually think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, somehow it's their fault, kids.
Yep.
So we made sure they know that's not the case. And I think that conversation I can see it even like in school with my oldest, completely changed him in the past 3 months. So kids know, and they feel it, and it affects them a lot. So, I think it's really important for people to know that.
It's awesome that you open the communication door that way. I mean, I think, look, communication is sort of the foundation of everything. And I believe that's my background. I use that with clients all the time. You don't have to know exactly how to do it, just that you want to improve it, right? So once you know that you want to work on it, there's so many good resources out there. And to just give kids the space to keep talking about it, to just open that door and say, we're here to have that conversation, that's huge. I mean, so many parents, because they just don't know what to say. Their intent is really good. They just don't know what to say or how to handle it. So they just don't do it. And taking that that's really brave, and it's vulnerable to open up to their questions. And I think it's one of the things that more and more parents could really learn from, is doing that same thing, just giving them the opportunity to keep talking about it. And just because they talked about it, one time, doesn't mean they won't want to talk about it again in another few months too. Things change, kids grow up, and it's worth revisiting that. So that's an awesome example, Yaniv, of how to give them the support that they need during this time. It's not just about the adults, right? It's how do we really support the kids and recognize what they're dealing with and how to help them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and thank you. And I could really see the difference. So I'd encourage people to think about it.
That's awesome.
I
love that.
Yeah, this has been great. I think I believe we provide a lot of good information, and I appreciate your time, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Sounds great.
We'd love to.
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Hold on. All right, now I'm gonna stop recording.